Welcome to the Clinical Research Podcast, bringing you the latest developments in research explained by our world-leading clinicians, academics and scientists based in Nottingham. Emphysema destroys alveoli in the lung, so they can't transfer oxygen into the blood. It doesn't just mean there's less working lung, it means the now useless lung is taking up chest space, and in turn that means the patient can't inhale as deeply as they need to in order to get sufficient oxygen to the remaining working alveoli. So treatment often focuses on creating space in the chest so that patients can inhale more deeply, and that means either surgery or finding a way to make the emphysematic lung tissue take up less space, and either of those approaches have their own complications. Respiratory consultant Sam Kemp has recently joined Nottingham University Hospital's NHS Trust, and part of his work is testing a new technique with the potential to help patients with the condition.
Over the years, a number of devices have been designed to try and achieve similar effects without actually resorting to surgery. The device that is now in routine clinical use and is the most studied and the device with the most evidence is something called endobronchial valves. These are little one-way devices with a bit like a stent, so they open up and fill the airway, and they've got a little duckbill valve in the end, so the air comes out but doesn't go back in. So every time the patient breathes out and there's some pressure on the airways, a little bit of air will come out the valves. When they breathe in and there's negative pressure in the chest, that duckbill valve shuts. So over time, that area of lung with the valves in deflates, so that instead of chopping the lung, that bit of lung out, you collapse it right down and you lose volume that way. Now, there are a variety of sort of anatomical and technical aspects that determine whether you are suitable for valves. One of the main things that determines someone's suitability for endobronchial valves is whether they have something called collateral ventilation. Each lung has a number of lobes that should be separate from each other so that there's no air mixing between those compartments. In a significant number of emphysema patients, there are abnormal air channels that exist between those different compartments and allow air mixing, and that stops the valves from working because air can come in around the back of the valves and stop that area deflating. What this trial aims to do is to try and close off those abnormal channels so that patients who would otherwise be suitable for valve treatment and therefore avoid surgery can be what we call converted from being collateral ventilation positive, that is having these abnormal air channels, to being collateral ventilation negative, and therefore a very good chance of responding to the valve treatment.
So it's kind of sealing up those leaks almost between the lobes, is that one way?
It is, yeah, exactly. So it's using this product called Aeroseal, which is a hydrofoam gel that you squirt into the airways. It fills those abnormal channels and effectively works like a glue to occlude those small airways.
Right, and obviously that's one of the big things there is it's helping avoid surgery.
We know that complications from valve treatment are less than from surgery. So your stay in hospital, this is if a procedure goes well, obviously, but your stay in hospital tends to be a little bit shorter. The rate of major complications is lower, and particularly with respect to cardiac complications after surgery, the chance of post-operative or post-procedure infection is less. And although there is the main risk of valves is something called a pneumothorax, where you get a tear in the lining of the lung and the lung goes down and you need a chest drain, which happens in about a quarter of patients. That compares to 99% of patients who leave surgery with a chest drain in place after lung volume reduction surgery. So outcomes in the literature are very similar, but valves are used because the evidence suggests that complications are lower. By avoiding surgery, they avoid potential complications.
Can you explain what this treatment does, how it works, the sort of mechanics of it, how it avoids those leakages?
The product is squirted into the airways down a catheter at a procedure called a bronchoscopy, where we look down with a little camera and inspect the airways, which is something that we have to do in order to put the valves in. We can do a test at the time of the bronchoscopy to tell us whether these abnormal air channels are present or not. If the air channels are not present, then we would just go straight ahead and put the valves in, because that would suggest that there's a very good chance of the valves working. But if the test suggested that there were abnormal air channels, we would squirt in initially 10 mils of this hydrofoam gel into the areas of the lung where we know there are these abnormal air channels. It's very quick. It's literally squirt the product down the catheter using a syringe, and then that product expands into those small air spaces. And over time, two things happen. The gel fills the spaces, and then as the air is absorbed from that gel, it sort of solidifies, closes off those channels, but also creates a bit of an inflammatory response. So you get some inflammation, and that assists in causing scarring up of those areas, so that the air channels are not only blocked by the glue, but eventually become scarred up and occluded in that fashion as well. That process can take a number of weeks. So what we do is 6 weeks after the product has been inserted, we are going to go back in and retest for those abnormal air channels. And if they no longer exist, we would put valves in. Now, in the long run, if this were to enter standard clinical practice, it may be that the insertion of the product and the valves could occur at the same time, but we need to wait on the evidence that the success rate is high enough that could be done.
So in terms of what you'll be looking at, what you'll be measuring, it's going to be whether that measure is different between when you first do it and then when you do it 6 weeks later.
Yes, so that's the primary outcome of the study, is the number of patients we can, what we call, convert from not being suitable to being suitable for valves.
So in terms of the timescale for all this, how long are we looking for this study to go on, and when are we likely to get the results, etc.?
It's expected that the recruitment process will last between 12 and 18 months. There are 3 sites in the UK at present and a number of other sites in Europe, and the company that's running the trial are aiming for a total of 15 sites across Europe, looking to recruit a total of 140 patients. The recruitment's competitive, so there's no limit on how many any one site can recruit, but once they hit 140, that will be the end of recruitment for everybody. So we are hoping that we can get at least 10 patients into the study here at Nottingham. We will be actively recruiting throughout that entire time period. Each patient is in the trial for between 9 and 12 months. So it's anticipated that recruitment will finish in the second half of next year, and that the trial itself will complete, i.e. all the data has been collected, at the end of 23. There will then be a data analysis period prior to the results being published. So we are expecting the results to be published in early 2024.
And if this shows what you hope it shows, what do you think will change for the patient experience for patients who have this condition?
So I think 2 things will happen. One is that it will allow greater access to a greater number of treatment choices for patients. Both endobronchial valves and lung volume reduction surgery are excellent treatments, and both have very similar, very good outcomes. There is a sort of historical wariness of lung volume reduction surgery because of outcomes from early trials and the way that surgery was performed. To be fair to surgery, it's now done in a much safer, less risky fashion. And with the introduction of emphysema multidisciplinary team meetings for decision making, decisions around who is and isn't appropriate for any of these treatments, but particularly surgery, are now much more robust than they used to be. But a lot of patients don't want to have surgery for a whole variety of reasons. Anesthetic can be difficult in these patients with very severe lung disease. There are problems with post-surgical chest pain, so ongoing pain at the site of surgery. And when people read about the potential, admittedly often rare complications from surgery, they just aren't willing to take that risk and would rather have a more minimally invasive endobronchial, i.e. through the airways treatment, than surgery if it was available. And this product is likely to allow a greater number of patients to go down that endobronchial route rather than having surgery. Now, the beauty of a lot of these endobronchial or bronchoscopic approaches is that if they don't work for whatever reason, if the patient doesn't respond as we would expect, then they still have that option of going on to have surgery. So in a number of places now, if there is a bronchoscopic approach that is suitable, we would usually try that before surgery, because it retains that second option for a patient. Whereas if they go and have surgery and it doesn't work, that's the end of it. I know that at least one surgical service in the UK is booking patients for lung volume reduction surgery for 2022 already. So there is a very substantial wait for lung volume reduction surgery. And in general, and particularly here, the wait for a bronchoscopy and a bronchoscopic procedure is substantially shorter. So it allows better access and faster access for patients who qualify for these treatments.
All right, cheers, Sam.
Brilliant.
Thanks ever so much.
All right, no worries. Take care, Matt. All right, bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks for listening. There are links in the show notes for more information on clinical research in Nottingham, and the website is nuh.nhs.uk/research. Our email and social media links are there too. If you want to stay up to date with the Clinical Research Podcast, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Google, wherever you normally get your podcasts. The more shows are rated and reviewed, the more search engines like them, and the easier it is for people to find us. So if you can subscribe and rate and review us, you'll be doing it for science, not just for our egos.